I canceled my sister's credit card the moment I discovered she'd been out shopping with my husband's mistress. Her reaction? Explosive, loud enough that the neighbors peeked outside. But what happened next? None of us, not even me, were prepared for it. Before I begin, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if stories like this stay with you, please like and subscribe. It really helps me continue sharing the truths I've carried for years. All right, let me pull you into the moment everything quietly began to shift. It wasn't dramatic at first. There was no screaming match, no late night tears, no big clue that the people closest to me were about to betray me. It was just a warm morning in Phoenix, sunlight sliding across the kitchen counter while I stood there holding my first cup of coffee, believing my life was stable. I was 34 then, married for nearly 8 years to my husband, Matt, who everyone else seemed to adore. And my younger sister, Laura, had moved to Arizona the year before, staying with us on and off while she tried to figure out her life, as she put it. We weren't the closest sisters growing up, but I always felt protective of her. She was impulsive, emotional, constantly searching for something. And I was the grounded one, the reliable one, the one who people called when things fell apart. Maybe that's why I agreed to help her rebuild her credit. Maybe that's why I put her on my account and gave her a card with a modest limit. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was doing the right thing. Looking back, that was the first crack I ignored, the small imbalance where she took and I gave. But at the time, it felt like love, family, responsibility. Life felt normal then. I worked from home as a medical billing coordinator. Matt traveled for work, sometimes 3 or 4 days at a time. And when he was away, Laura kept me company, sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling on her phone, talking about men she shouldn't trust but always did anyway. There were small moments that should have warned me. A whisper of perfume that didn't belong to me on Matt's jacket. A strange tension when he and Laura were in the same room, like both of them were hiding different secrets behind forced smiles. A half-finished sentence Laura once started, "If you ever knew what I knew about him," before she laughed it off and blamed wine. But I pushed all of it aside. I didn't want to be suspicious. Suspicion cracks marriages. Suspicion destroys families. So I ignored the unease and went on with my routine. Until the day everything shifted. The day I opened my banking app and saw a series of charges that felt like a punch to the ribs, charges that didn't just come from places my sister would shop, but places tied to someone else entirely. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then denial. Then that quiet, cold instinct I wish I'd listened to earlier. I remember sitting very still, staring at the screen as if the numbers might rearrange themselves. A boutique I knew too well, one I never set foot in but always saw on the Instagram of a woman I wished I didn't recognize. My husband's mistress. My breath caught. My heartbeat slowed. It wasn't just betrayal. It was collaboration. It was two people I trusted, my sister and my husband's secret lover, spending my money like it was a shared joke. And even then, I didn't confront anyone. Not yet. I simply pressed cancel card with a calmness I didn't understand. What I didn't know was that this tiny action, just tapping a button, would set off a chain of explosions none of us were ready for. Because Laura didn't just react. She detonated. And that was only the beginning. Before everything really fell apart, my life looked ordinary, comfortable, almost boring, in the kind of way you start to mistake for safety. Most weekdays started the same. I'd wake up early, before the Arizona sun turned the house into an oven, and make coffee while the house was still quiet. Matt would usually be half awake, scrolling emails in bed, mumbling something about meetings and flights. We had our little routines. I'd leave his mug on the counter the same way every morning, handle turned slightly to the right, one sugar packet leaning against it, like a tiny white flag. It was silly, but it felt like our thing. He'd come in, kiss my cheek, say, "Morning, M," grab his coffee, and pretend the day wasn't already owning him. When he wasn't traveling, he worked long hours at some corporate sales job he always called soul-sucking but necessary. And I worked my remote job from the dining table, headphones in, spreadsheets open, fighting with insurance companies on behalf of patients who never knew my name. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. Or at least, that's what I wanted to believe. Laura's presence added chaos, but in a way that felt familiar. She'd always been the whirlwind to my anchor. 5 years younger, dramatic, messy, emotional. Growing up, I was the one who cleaned up behind her, literally and figuratively. Late night calls. Can you pick me up? Can I crash at your place? I messed up, Em. Please don't tell Mom. So when she called and said she wanted a fresh start, that she was tired of bouncing between jobs and cities, it felt natural to say, come stay with us for a bit. A bit turned into months. At first, it was kind of nice. She filled the silence when Matt was away. We'd watch trashy reality shows on the couch, sharing a blanket and judging strangers' lives like ours weren't quietly rotting underneath. We'd gossip, laugh, share wine on Friday nights. Sometimes she'd open up about her past relationships, all these dramatic stories with men who used her, lied to her, took her money, her time, her sanity. And I'd nod, always playing the wise older sister. You just need stability, I told her one night. Someone who actually shows up. Someone who doesn't treat your life like a side quest. She looked at me over the rim of her wine glass and said, like Matt, huh? I remember smiling then, a little proud, a little defensive. Yeah, like Matt. To her, it probably sounded like I was bragging. To me, it felt like stating a fact. Matt wasn't perfect, but he wasn't like the guy she described. He had a good job. He didn't cheat. He didn't disappear for days. He was solid. That's what I thought. Helping Laura get on her feet felt like the right thing to do. She started picking up part-time work, but her hours were inconsistent. I noticed her struggling with bills, asking to borrow money just until Friday, then just until next week. That's when I suggested adding her as an authorized user on my credit card. I'll keep the limit low, I told her. Use it for essentials, okay? Groceries, gas, maybe a white outfit if you really need it. But that's it. Her eyes actually filled with tears. Em, seriously? You'd do that for me? Of course, I said. You're my sister. She hugged me like I'd just saved her life. I believed it was gratitude. Now, I'm not so sure. For a while, it seemed fine. I checked the statements regularly, small charges at the gas station, fast food, a drugstore here and there. Nothing alarming. Nothing that made me pause. Matt, for his part, seemed supportive. Good on you, he said when I told him. She needs structure. Maybe this will help her grow up. He said it casually, like he was detached, but not unkind. It was easy to believe everyone was on the same team then. Our days blurred into each other. Work, dinner, TV, sleep. Occasionally a date night when Matt was in town. Sometimes Laura tagged along when we went out for a casual bite, turning what should have been couple time into a trio, but I didn't complain. It was temporary, I kept telling myself, just until she found her footing. There were small, barely noticeable shifts, though, like the way Laura's eyes would linger on Matt when he talked about his job or a work trip. Not flirty, exactly, but analyzing. Or how Matt would sometimes ask a little too many questions about her life, her exes, her wild stories. He'd laugh at things I didn't find that funny, ask for details I didn't think he needed. One night, I walked into the living room and found the two of them on the couch, sitting closer than usual, laughing at something on her phone. They moved apart the second they saw me. Not dramatically, just a subtle inch or two. You guys okay? I asked, half joking. Yeah, Laura said a bit too quickly, just showing him this stupid meme. Matt smiled. Yeah, totally harmless. I laughed with them, but something about his tone scratched at the back of my mind, like an itch I couldn't quite reach. I told myself I was overthinking. I always had a tendency to worry too much, to look for patterns in nothing. That's what I'd been told my whole life. Emily, you're reading into it. Emily, relax. Emily, not everything is a problem. So I convinced myself it was nothing. But a few weeks later, Laura came home with shopping bags that didn't match her salary, didn't match her situation, and definitely didn't match the rules we'd agreed on. And that was the first tiny moment where my version of normal life quietly stopped being normal at all. The shift didn't start with a scream or a confession. It started with something almost embarrassingly small, numbers on a screen that didn't belong there. I was sitting in my laptop on a Tuesday afternoon, halfway through updating patient accounts, when I got a notification, unusual activity detected. Normally, I'd ignore it until later, but something inside me tugged. A small, uneasy whisper. I opened the banking app. At first, I didn't even understand what I was looking at. A $178 charge at a boutique I'd never been to. Another for $112 at a makeup store I rarely stepped inside. Then a bigger one, $3.29, at a high-end shoe store in Scottsdale. My immediate thought was, she slipped. She bought something stupid again. I wasn't angry yet. Just tired. Laura had always been impulsive, and I was used to forgiving her. But then I saw the name of another store. A place that made my stomach tighten. It was a small boutique known for posting elaborate try-on videos on Instagram. I knew of it only because a woman named Chloe, the woman who had once commented too flirtatiously on my husband's photos, tagged the store every time she did a shopping spree. My pulse slowed. Not sped up, slowed, like my body was bracing itself. I clicked into the transaction details. Card present. Meaning Laura wasn't buying online. She was there, physically, shopping in the same expensive places frequented by the woman I wished I didn't know. A wave of cold unease rolled through me. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. There had to be a logical explanation. Laura must have tagged along with a new friend. Or maybe she'd met someone who treated her. Or maybe the store name was a coincidence. But I couldn't shake the tension in my spine. Still, I tried to let it go. Hours later, around dinner time, I brought it up casually. Hey, Laura, did you use your card today? I got an alert. She froze, not an obvious freeze, but a tiny one. Her fork hovered for half a second too long. Then she smiled, light and airy. Oh yeah, just grabbed a couple things. Don't worry, I'll pay you back Friday. But something about her tone felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced being casual. I watched her take a sip of water, and the glass shook slightly in her hand. A tremor, a clue. A normal person might have confronted her right then, demanded receipts, demanded honesty. But I wasn't normal in that moment. I was scared of what she'd say, of what she wouldn't say. And I was scared of my own instincts. So I nodded and let the conversation die. But that night in bed, the anxiety wouldn't quiet. I lay awake listening to the soft hum of the ceiling fan, the shallow breathing of my husband beside me. At one point he shifted, turning away from me, and the movement felt symbolic in a way I didn't want to examine. I checked his location on the phone plan the next morning. I told myself it was a silly habit I developed because he traveled so much, not because I doubted him. He was exactly where he said he'd be, downtown, at work. But when I scrolled through the credit card activity again, I noticed the timestamp of one of the boutique purchases. 2:14 p.m. same day Matt worked from home. He had claimed he never left the house except for a quick coffee run. My chest tightened. Coincidence. It had to be. But when I thought back to that afternoon, I remembered something small. When I came downstairs to grab water, both Matt and Laura were gone. I assumed they were each in the backyard or garage, but now the memory wobbled in my mind, uncertain. The next few days were a blur of tiny moments that felt off. Laura rushing to silence her phone when I walked into the room. Matt leaving the table to answer calls he said were just work stuff. A faint scent on his clothes, something floral, unfamiliar. It was all so minor, so easy to explain away. But doubt doesn't need proof at first. It only needs a spark. And the spark became impossible to ignore when I checked the card balance again that Friday morning. A new charge, bigger, at a store I knew for a fact was frequently tagged by Chloe. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or laugh. Instead, I did something simple, quiet, almost gentle. I pressed cancel card. And in doing so, I lit the fuse that would blow the truth wide open. Because within minutes, my sister began calling me nonstop. And in her first voicemail, shaky, furious, panicked, I heard something that told me this was no misunderstanding. She wasn't scared about money. She was scared about what I might now discover. Laura's first voicemail was angry. Her second was frantic. By the third, her voice cracked in a way that told me everything without saying anything. Emily, seriously, call me back. This isn't funny. Funny. I hadn't laughed once in days. I let her calls go to voicemail while I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone like it was a detonator, because something was breaking open inside me, slowly, painfully, like a bruise spreading under the skin. When she finally stopped calling, I checked the transaction history again, scrolling through each line. And then I saw it. A charge at Copper Ridge Cafe, a place I knew instantly. Not because I'd ever been there with Laura, but because it was where Matt had taken me on our second date. A small, quiet cafe tucked behind an art gallery, special to us, sentimental, almost sacred. And now my sister had used my card there at 11:41 a.m. on a day Matt also claimed to be working remotely from home. I closed my eyes, not crying, just overwhelmed by the weight of things refusing to add up. I needed proof, real proof, something undeniable. So I opened Instagram, an app one rarely used except for posting occasional pet photos, and typed in the name I didn't want to search. Chloe, my husband's rumored mistress. The woman who commented heart eye emojis on his photos long before he turned comments off because work colleagues were being weird. Her profile was public, glossy, curated, full of soft filters and brand tags. I scrolled down until I saw it, a photo she posted 2 days earlier. A mirror selfie in a boutique. The same boutique Laura had shopped at with my card. The caption read, "Retail therapy with my favorite person sparkles hash spoiled." Favorite person. 2 words that made my stomach twist. But the part that sent a cold tremor through my entire body wasn't the caption. It was the reflection in the mirror. Behind her, slightly blurred, barely noticeable, was a familiar silhouette. Slim, long hair, holding several bags. Laura, my sister. I dropped the phone onto the bed like it burned me. I wanted to deny what I saw. I wanted to believe the image was a coincidence, a trick of the light, someone who just looked like her. But I knew my sister's posture, her hairstyle, the jacket she wore everywhere, and the betrayal settled into my bones like ice. Not just Matt, not just Chloe. Laura was involved. Maybe she wasn't sleeping with him. Maybe she was. Maybe she was just covering for them. Maybe she was being used. But none of those possibilities softened the truth. She was standing next to the woman trying to dismantle my marriage, using my money. I felt something inside me snap, not loudly, not violently, quietly, a thin fracture in a place that used to feel safe. For hours, I sat on the floor of the bedroom with my back against the dresser, scrolling, zooming, checking timestamps, matching outfits, cross-referencing posts with my calendar. Each piece added weight, clarity, confirmation. The evidence formed a picture I didn't want to see. They shopped together. They ate together. They spent my money together. And it wasn't a one-time thing. Laura had been slipping out while I worked. Matt had been going on calls that lasted just long enough for quick errands. And Chloe, beautiful, smug Chloe, documented everything like a highlight reel of my humiliation. By evening, my anxiety turned into something sharper. Not rage, not grief, determination. Because the final blow came when I opened Laura's Instagram. She wasn't private either. Her newest story posted that same morning, a boomerang clip of clinking glasses at a cafe. A tiny corner of a familiar watch appeared in the frame. Matt's watch. I recognized it instantly. I bought it for our anniversary. That was the moment I transitioned from confused to certain, from hurt to hollow. The truth wasn't hiding anymore. It was sitting in plain sight, reflected in screens, receipts, and mirror selfies. And as the sun set, leaving the room in a soft orange haze, I realized I had reached the lowest emotional point. The place where betrayal settles so deep it becomes almost calm. I stood up slowly, wiped my face, and whispered to no one, "Okay, if that's how you want to play it." The heartbreak didn't fade, but something new rose through it. Sharp, deliberate, controlled. A beginning, because now that I knew the truth, the next phase was inevitable. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. I was going to plan. The morning after everything clicked into place, I woke up with an unfamiliar feeling. Clarity. Not peace. Not acceptance. Just a sharp, focused awareness that something had shifted inside me. I didn't cry anymore. Didn't shake. Didn't replay the images in my head. Instead, I moved quietly through the house, taking in every detail of the life I'd been living. My life, built with care, with intention, with belief. And every piece of it suddenly felt like evidence in a case where I was the only one telling the truth. Matt's jacket on the chair. Laura's shoes by the door. Two people who shared space with me, but not loyalty. I made myself coffee, sat at the table, and opened a blank notebook. I didn't know why at first, but once the pen touched the page, the words poured out. Don't react. Don't confront. Observe. Plan. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about control. For weeks, I had been stumbling around in confusion, letting them dictate the narrative while I second-guessed myself. Now the roles were changing. Silently, I listed everything I knew: times, dates, stores, screenshots. Then I listed everything I suspected. And then, what I needed to confirm. The list was ugly, but it was real. I didn't tell anyone what was happening, not friends, not co-workers, not even my mother. If I let the story out too early, someone would try to soften it, explain it away, suggest therapy, communication, second chances. I wasn't ready for anyone else's voice. I needed to hear my own. When Matt came home that evening, I watched him with a quietness he didn't recognize. He kissed my cheek like he always did, but it felt staged, like muscle memory rather than affection. His eyes darted toward the hallway where Laura usually lounged, and the flicker of anticipation there was impossible to ignore. He didn't ask about my day. He didn't notice my stillness, and that told me more than any confession could. Later, when Laura returned from running errands, she barely looked at me. She breezed past with that nervous, brittle smile she'd been wearing lately. The kind you put on when you know you're one wrong word away from everything collapsing. I watched her set her purse down. The same purse from the boutique. The purse I unknowingly paid for. For a moment, emotion surged. Hurt, anger, disbelief. But I breathed slowly, forcing it all back down. This wasn't the moment for messy feelings. This was the moment for precision. Over the next few days, I became a ghost in my own home, present, polite, invisible in all the ways that mattered. I didn't pry, didn't question, didn't show cracks, and in that silence, they grew careless. Matt left his laptop open more often, assuming I wasn't paying attention. Laura left receipts shoved deep in her purse, forgetting how easily paper tears. And their conversations, those half-whispered exchanges in the kitchen, the hurried shuffling when I walked into a room, became louder simply because I wasn't reacting. Both of them believed the danger had passed. They thought I had returned to normal. They thought they were safe. And that illusion was the most powerful tool I had. Even in the quiet moments, the emotional reflection crept in. I kept wondering why. Why my husband? Why my sister? Why each other? Why now? Was it convenience? Ego? Opportunity? Boredom? I didn't know yet. But I was determined to find out. Not to save the marriage. Not to save the relationship with my sister. But to understand exactly what had been taken from me before I decided what to do with the ruins. Because a part of me, small but undeniable, wanted justice. Not the screaming, hair-pulling kind. Not public humiliation for the sake of drama. I wanted them to feel clarity. The same sharp, cold clarity I woke up with. I wanted them to face the truth they had built with lies. So, I started planning the moment that would expose everything, not violently, not loudly, but in a way they could never twist or escape. A moment where all three of them, Matt, Laura, and Chloe, would see themselves exactly as I now saw them. But plans need patience, and patience requires composure. So every day, I smiled a little more convincingly, cooked dinner a little more carefully, pretended a little more deeply. Inside, though, I was assembling the final piece, because when the time came, I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to let them confront themselves, and they would never see it coming. The moment I had been waiting for finally came on a Saturday afternoon, one of those bright Arizona days when the air feels sharp and the sunlight exaggerates every flaw. It was the perfect day for truth. I had spent the entire week gathering the last pieces of what I needed: screenshots, timestamps, printed receipts, and one very important detail: confirmation that all three of them would be in the same place at the same time. They made it easy. Laura planned a girls' brunch with Chloe. Matt claimed he had a team meeting at the same restaurant. Different excuses. Same destination. They didn't even coordinate their lies. By noon, I was sitting in my car across from the cafe, watching people come and go. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My heartbeat was steady. I didn't feel fear or sadness or even anger. I felt ready. At 12:17 p.m., I saw them. First Matt, stepping out of his car, dressed too nicely for a casual meeting. Then Chloe, walking up behind him, smiling like she already owned the day. And finally Laura, laughing at something Chloe whispered, holding a shopping bag like a trophy. Watching the three of them together, moving in sync, comfortable, familiar, hit me harder than any confession ever could. It wasn't a fling. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a system, a routine, a pattern they'd grown confident in. I waited until they were seated before I walked toward the entrance. Every step felt strangely calm, like my body had been preparing for this exact walk for weeks. When I opened the door, the bell chimed softly, and the sound seemed to cut through the entire room. I spotted them immediately. They were seated at a corner table, leaning in close, laughing over mimosas. Matt had his hand near Chloe's. Laura had her phone out, filming something. They looked happy. My stomach clenched, but my steps didn't falter. I approached the table silently, and it took a full 3 seconds before any of them noticed me. Matt looked up first. His face drained of color so fast it almost looked comedic. Emily, he stammered. Laura froze mid-laugh, her lips still parted, eyes wide. Chloe's smile faded slowly, replaced with a stiff, defensive expression. Hi, I said calmly. Funny seeing all of you here together. No one spoke. The silence was almost theatrical. I reached into my bag and pulled out a neat, organized folder, my evidence. I placed it on the table like a centerpiece. I continued gently, since all three of you seem so comfortable spending time together, we could go through this as a group. Matt swallowed hard. Laura whispered, please don't. Chloe rolled her eyes, trying to recover her confidence. I opened the folder. First page, the boutique screenshot with the mirror selfie. Second page, the cafe receipt with Laura's signature. Third page, the boomerang with Matt's watch. Fourth page, a printout of my canceled card notification. I just want clarity, I said softly, because it looks like the three of you have been living a separate life behind my back. No, this is not. This is being blown out of proportion, Matt attempted, but his voice cracked. Really? I asked. Then maybe you can explain why my sister is shopping with the woman you've been texting for months. Laura's face crumpled. Emily, I didn't mean. And you, I turned to Chloe, should probably consider the fact that every single thing you post publicly becomes evidence. Chloe looked away, cheeks burning. But the moment that sealed everything was small, almost invisible. Matt reached for Laura's arm. Not mine. His. Comfort. Reassurance. A silent admission. Laura flinched but didn't pull away. That was it. The truth served without shouting, without drama. They exposed themselves simply by existing exactly as they were. I gathered the papers back into the folder. You don't owe me explanations, I said quietly. You owe yourselves the truth. And each other. Then I stood up, adjusting my bag over my shoulder. I canceled the card, I added, looking directly at Laura. But you already knew that. She burst into tears. Matt called after me. Chloe stared at the table like she wished she could vanish. I didn't look back. Walking out of that cafe felt like stepping out of a fire I didn't realize I'd been standing in. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't broken. I felt clean. And for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. Because the climax wasn't the confrontation. The climax was realizing I didn't need any of them anymore. I drove home from the cafe with the windows down, letting the warm wind wash over me like I was rinsing off the last traces of their lies. The world outside looked the same palm trees, same traffic, same bright Arizona sun, but something inside me was different. The silence in the car didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt clean. When I pulled into the driveway, I half expected Matt or Laura to already be there waiting, desperate, ready with excuses. But the house was quiet when I stepped in, almost peaceful. The kind of peaceful that comes when poison finally leaves a room. I set my bag down, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady, my breathing slow. I felt tired, deeply tired, but not hollow the way I feared I would. It was a soft kind of exhaustion, like the aftermath of finishing a marathon you never trained for, but somehow survived. I didn't pack his things. I didn't throw away his. I didn't scream or break anything. I just sat at the table and let my body settle into the reality that life as I knew it was officially over. About 30 minutes later, I heard the front door open. Matt stepped in, breathing hard, as if running after me would somehow reverse what had happened. He looked disheveled, hair messy, eyes red, tie crooked. The polished, controlled man I married wasn't standing there anymore. "Emily, please," he said, voice low, cracked. "Can we talk?" I didn't look up. "I don't think talking will change what happened." He took a step closer. She wasn't, this whole thing just got out of hand. I never meant to hurt you. People always say that when the damage is done. But intentions don't undo consequences. I finally looked at him. "You didn't just hurt me. You involved my sister. You built an entire side life using my home as the backdrop." He winced like the words physically struck him. Before he could respond, another person walked through the door. Laura. She looked ruined. Mascara smudged, eyes puffy, hands trembling. She didn't try to touch me. She didn't even try to speak at first. She just stood there, crying silently, like a child who realized too late what she'd destroyed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was stupid. I was lonely. I thought Matt, anyone, finally saw me. I didn't think about you. I didn't think about what I was doing." Her words were desperate, broken, but something about them didn't move me. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood something. I had spent most of my life cleaning up her messes. And this time, she didn't trip. She jumped. "You made choices," I said calmly. "Both of you did. And you'll have to live with them." She stepped forward, reaching out like she wanted me to hug her. But I didn't move. The distance between us wasn't just physical anymore. It was permanent. "I need space," I said simply. "From both of you." The look on their faces, shock, fear, guilt, would have shattered me once. But now it only confirmed what I already knew. I had finally stopped rescuing people who never rescued me. Matt tried again. "Can we fix this? Please. I'll do anything." I shook my head. No. Fixing implies something still intact. And that was the truth. My marriage was not cracked. It was gone. My relationship with Laura wasn't damaged. It was severed. He sank into a chair like his legs gave out. Laura slid down the wall, crying into her hands. Their suffering didn't make me feel triumphant. It didn't satisfy me. It didn't hurt me either. It just was. I stood. "I'm going to stay at a hotel tonight," I said quietly. "When I come back tomorrow, I expect you both gone. We'll talk about logistics later." Neither argued. Neither fought. Because the truth wasn't up for debate anymore. I packed a small overnight bag, walked past them, and left the house. No dramatic exit. No slamming doors. just a quiet retreat into a world where I finally chose myself. That night in the hotel, lying alone in the crisp sheets, I let the first real wave of grief hit me. Tears came, not for Matt, not for Laura, but for the years I'd spent believing loyalty guaranteed loyalty. By morning, the tears were gone. Something steadier had taken their place. Not happiness, not closure, but possibility. And in that stillness, I knew my life wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The weeks that followed were strangely quiet. Not empty, just quiet, like the world had finally stopped shouting at me through the people I loved. Matt moved out first, barely taking anything besides clothes and his laptop. He left a note on the counter that said he hoped someday I'd forgive him. I didn't keep it. Forgiveness isn't something you can demand or request. It's something that grows naturally, and nothing about what he did deserve growth yet. Laura left the next day. She tried hugging me before she walked out, but I stepped back. Not coldly, just honestly. The space between us wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about truth. She had crossed a line she couldn't uncross, not even with tears. I wished her well, though. I truly did. And when the house finally became silent, I sat in the middle of the living room and just breathed. For the first time in months, maybe years, the air felt like it belonged to me. Healing didn't come in some dramatic wave. It came in tiny, surprising moments. Waking up and realizing I didn't have to wonder where Matt was. Walking into the kitchen without bracing myself for Laura's tension. Checking my phone and seeing no messages that made my stomach twist. Just stillness. Just space. Just me. I got a therapist. I joined a small women's group that met on Thursday nights, strangers who turned into a quiet support system. I learned boundaries I should have learned years ago. I stopped apologizing for things I didn't cause. I stopped rescuing people who exploited my empathy. And little by little, I found myself again. Some nights, the loneliness felt sharp, like a sudden drop in temperature. Other nights, it felt gentle, a reminder that solitude isn't the same as abandonment. Solitude is a chance to rebuild without interference. About 2 months after everything happened, I drove past the same cafe where I confronted them. I didn't stop. I didn't feel triggered. I didn't replay anything. I simply looked at the building, nodded to myself, and kept driving. Closure looks different for everyone. For me, it wasn't a big speech, or forgiveness, or vengeance. It was realizing I no longer cared about their version of the story. I didn't need validation. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need answers. They had shown me who they were, and I believed them. My life slowly rearranged itself into something simpler, cleaner. I met new people, formed new routines, found new joys, small but meaningful. A morning walk, a good cup of coffee, silence that didn't feel threatening, nights where I could finally sleep without bracing for disappointment. And the biggest lesson? Betrayal doesn't define you. It reveals the people who never deserved a seat in your life to begin with. Some people asked later if I regretted confronting them calmly instead of exploding. But no, I don't regret it at all. The calm was my victory. The clarity was my power. The quiet was my closure. I didn't need to destroy their lives. They had already done that themselves. All I did was step out of the wreckage. So, if you've ever felt blindsided by the people closest to you, if you've ever questioned your intuition, or held on too long because you believed loyalty was earned by loyalty, I hope my story shows you something important. You are allowed to choose yourself, even if it means walking away from the people you once loved most. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let the truth break everything, and then build a life on the pieces that actually belong to you. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels. And if you take anything from what I've shared today, let it be this one simple truth. Losing the wrong people is how you make space for the right version of yourself.